December 1st, 2005, a day that will forever change my life. Transferring from Catholic school to public school at a young age was a confusing yet emotional challenge in my life. The next 5.5 years, I would become known in more ways than one throughout the school, students, and faculty alike, mainly as the one kid who thought he could do whatever he wanted. But from 2005 to 2011, my tastes in media evolved and changed in several directions to the point where revisiting my elementary school years for Shareverse is quite the challenge. But there are major plot points, especially towards the end, that are mostly consistent from the original ideas all those years ago. And because of the uncertainty, giving a title for this time period was nearly impossible. But from my self-reflection, I feel like the title of the Rehab storyline is more than fitting. Oh, where are my manners? I'm AJ, and if this is your exposure to the channel, you might be wondering, what does Shareverse entail? Well, a good example can be in my introduction video from last year. Basically, Shareverse is the integration between media that I was aware of growing up with these characters labeled as astral souls, and intertwined with some of my own personal life experiences using a fictitious version of myself called a reflection. This is kind of a sequel to the Girl Wars video, but that one had a few story beats that I didn't really expand upon, so some of those points will be revived in this video. Also, because this is going to talk about 6 years of my life, a lot of media stuff is going to be thrown all over the place, so I apologize if things get a little too out of control. But one final point, if it sounds like my reflection, who was also called AJ for some reason, seems like a Gary Stu, a lot of my early storylines I made were centered around him. It wasn't until middle school where I began to experiment with storylines where my reflection is not predominantly present. So with this revision, I decided to expand upon the astral souls around him during this time, where some intentional strings were pulled at that time. Alright, no more setups, let's jump in. The Girl Wars was the most shocking moment for my reflection, alongside the astral context that he was associated with, including his astral parents watching from afar. The conclusion featured AJ in a near unconscious state, which prevented him from fully turning to the dark side. The Disney alignment picked him up and decided on what to do when he woke up. A spectator of the war and Warner alignment Queen of the Amazons, Diana Prince, yes Wonder Woman, offered that the Warner alignment could be a good place for him to recover from his enraged behavior while under substantial watch. The Disney alignment agreed, where Peter would still be his astral guardian, and Drakina forced Peter to make the decision to say yes. So the following day, without any warning, AJ was not only placed in a public school, but would be under the careful eye of the Warner alignment. Meanwhile, two other things started up within kindergarten. One was the Empire shortly recovering from the war. The damages for them was only one Star Destroyer and several Stormtroopers dying. So during this time, there were only a couple of Stormtrooper units that went after AJ. Again, if you're wondering how the Empire is still around, even though they were destroyed 300 years ago in Shareverse, the recent success of the Episode 3 film adaptation and the preceding Clone Wars merchandise gave Palpatine the funds to rebuild his empire. Since his original plan failed from the war, he resorted to killing the child. I mean, his loyal apprentice killed several, so dude's used to it. But in addition, the members of the light side of the war all agreed to go after their former leader for sending them on a borderline suicide mission. And because a lot of their entertainment rights were from the Warner alignment, AJ was surrounded by his disgruntled ex-soldiers by the start of 2006. Thankfully, many of them faded one by one following the implosion of 4 kids in the Sad AM business. And because he was a stupid 5-year-old, AJ honest to God thought that the girls were actually ghosts, haunting him for his past mistakes, not knowing they all survived the final battle until years later. Yeah, that's going to be a common thing with this storyline. My reflection will assume one thing, only to realize that years later that some of it was preordained by Diana as trials to make him more independent and knowledgeable about the lifestyle of astral souls. For example, even though they were in rival alignments, Diana arranged private meetings with his astral parents to give progress reports on how their son was with Rehab. This relationship especially increased when Jetix was able to use the entertainment rights from the Warner alignment, such as stuff from DC, and Peter would get a spot in the Warner alignment with Spectacular Spider-Man airing on Kids WB. So that was kindergarten, more of a transition from the Girl Wars to whatever the rest of the grades entailed, where my reflection begins to recover his contacts with Astro Souls for the preceding years. But the first major reoccurring conflict happens in the summer before first grade. I think it's pretty obvious that by 2006, I was kind of into Star Wars. I had the Lego game, several Lego sets, and even the movies. But one movie I did not have in my collection always mystified me, and it was not the Ewok films. No, that was episode 2. My only exposure to the movie was through the Lego game, but the first level for episode 2 of the original game does not start with the pursuit in Coruscant. So, on one summer night in August, I was able to get the chance to watch episode 2 on Fox, and instantly confused on what I was watching. Why was there a ship that randomly blew up? Who was this woman with leeches? And why in the hell did she turn into a green monster when she died? Sure, I could have paid attention and listened to the audio, but again, I was a stupid 6-year-old. I'm not paying attention to the dialogue, I only care about the visuals. Shortly after this moment, the rest of my family came back home in time to watch the Cheetah Girls 2 premiere on Disney Channel. And yet the whole time I was scarred by a gulp shitto. Ladies and gentlemen, Zam Wessel, possibly the most pathetic and incompetent bounty hunter in the Star Wars galaxy, became an ultimate trauma source for me growing up. And much like Trakina, I had to incorporate her interacting with my reflection in Shareverse one way or another. So with AJ growing up, he never kept his mouth shut. He told anyone about his recent trauma, and eventually the Empire found out. So for a grand total of 500 credits, Zam was hired to kill him in any way possible, starting with the first grade. The flip side was that she sucked at her job. She tried to kill him in several attempts, and they all failed, mainly for the fact that whenever she cornered him, AJ cowered up and broke down in hysterics. And with that pathetic counter-defense, Zam never finished the job as a form of pity. This would happen several times for the next 3 years. And that's all AJ dealt with in the first grade. But not to worry, because starting with second grade, I became highly invested in one of the most popular anime series ever made. That's right, Naruto! Also, Dragon Ball later, but we'll get to that in a bit. So, just to rip the band-aid off, originally I had my reflection have contacts with Mr. Uzumaki and other members from the Hidden Leaf Village. However, my relationship with Naruto was the pure definition of a fad. As soon as the Tsunade arc was about to wrap up, I started to drop out of the series. It wouldn't be until years later, and I mean over 10 years later, that I came back to watch the series and appreciate what I missed out on. But because I didn't have as much time with the series, I decided not to include any of the Astro Souls from that series into the revisions. Because at that point, Sasuke was an edgy boy that left the village and everyone was depressed. Plus, the endless filler was starting up, and it made me completely disinterested in the show from then on out. I haven't started Shippuden yet, but with that show's filler, I'm already dreading for that day to come. But do you know who was around during this storyline that I decided to keep in for the revisions? The Lyoko Warriors. Mid! AJ was already familiar with them during the Girl Wars, but now during Rehab, he began to see them more and more. And with this frequent exposure, he grew a hatred for them. He thought they were better than everyone else, they kept rewinding their clocks for quote-unquote progress, and the fact they were French also didn't help. I should know, I watched almost 80% of this shit out of spite and boredom. Eventually, Yumi, one of the warriors, got annoyed to the point where she was able to infuse herself with a shard of the Shining Ray, a powerful source that only affects Warner Alignment Astro Souls that grant them random abilities. For Yumi's power, she was given a random sword, one that was no different to her boyfriend's. The 5 of them would be present until the end of 5th grade. but by then, AJ had other contacts to be around. Even in 2nd grade, he got contacts from the Viacom alignment, especially on Nickelodeon, but many of them were already on their way out the door, with no foreseeable replacements. At least he was able to pick up some electronic souvenirs. This general pickiness of AJ gaining contacts around this time spread throughout 2nd grade. Diana suggested to Peter that he should introduce people from Marvel to AJ and see what resonates to him. But even still, AJ didn't have a clique aside Spider-Man. He liked the first Iron Man movie, he wasn't afraid of the Hulk anymore, the X-Men were cool, but there was not a lot that he could motivate himself to request contacts. With this uncertainty, Peter hitched up an idea. He asked Black Cat if she could send a surprise attack to AJ in the middle of a summer night to test him. As per usual at this time, AJ thought his life was on the line when he was attacked and accidentally slipped into his rage. Using a combination of several machinery-based devices, he somehow trapped Felicia into an endless void, for which she would be trapped there for several years. The only person who could free her had no idea how to do it, and Felicia would have a burning resentment to him whenever she returned. But also on a positive note, prior to 3rd grade, a Clone Wars movie had been released in theaters, and a show was greenlit on Cartoon Network that fall. Because of that, the Warner alignment was able to put the entire Empire under their jurisdiction whenever they entered the Milky Way galaxy. So Palpatine was on serious watch for whatever plan he was going to make. It did not stop Zam for trying and failing at her job though. 3rd grade really began in the second half of the school year, with the end of Jetix in February. I already discussed its downfall in the 3rd Fox Kids special part, but in short, the former Fox Kids crew in the Disney alignment were untouchable, destroying Kids WB and their resources, with Drakina being one step closer to complete domination of the Sat AM business. But in a series of unfortunate events, Mickey got involved, one of her employees almost died from an assassination, and Jennifer beat the shit out of her. Ultimately, she lost all of her contacts from Jetix, including her best friend for over 10 years, and Jetix rebranded into Disney XD with a brand new coat of paint. Yeah, Marvel was still around, but under strict, archaic rules, Drakina could not be anywhere close to them. But with this loss of power, Jennifer decided to let Diana know in a private meeting that all contact with the Disney alignment is gone, and that she's been watching the Alien Family for years. She promised that the minute AJ leaves Rehab, she'll kill him. Now, She-Hulk's domination for being number 1 will be explained when we get into 5th grade. For now, Diana had a ticking clock on her head to have AJ spend at least 1 minute of combat with a gamma-filled attorney from Manhattan. And so, some of these tests got more creative. Now, it wasn't like Diana was creating all of AJ's problems he had to face, because there were storylines initiated outside of her control. For example, Universal Disaster was entirely independent to the Warner alignment, but when it came time to the side story, Universal Disaster Discovery, Diana found out about AJ's temporary ban on his contacts and came up with a plan. If you thought Raven's heel turn into being a villain was rushed and awkward, that's because Diana knew about Raven's part-time occupation at Discovery Kids and asked if she could pretend to be a villain in order to test AJ. And the results were a success. But on a more honest approach, AJ was also given personal training from Diana in general. Now, if Diana knew that Jennifer was going to kill a kid, why didn't she stop her? Well, it's mostly because of the different tiers and leagues in the Astro Soul hierarchy. Clearly, Diana is far stronger than Jen, so it almost becomes an unfair fight if she did intervene. Now, AJ knew his opponent would be Jennifer, and more times than not, he had distressful thoughts that he would lose and what would happen to him if he died. Regardless, he pushed forward, hoping that he would be strong enough for that day. The next major shift in my media consumption occurred once again in the summer season. While over at a friend's house, I came across a little known game called Super Smash Bros. Brawl for the Wii, and one character instantaneously grabbed my attention, and likewise, that character would eventually be implemented in Shareverse. 4th grade was almost manifested through luck itself. Only a few weeks into the school year, my journey to uncovering who or what a Samus is would end with knowing the release of Metroid Prime Trilogy coming to the Wii. Now, AJ already had context to the bigger named Astro Souls from Nintendo, but he never really had a full attachment to Pokemon, and he didn't understand Mario all that well, even though they were both Italian. But with Metroid, he had the motivation to get to know them more. One problem, he didn't have Brawl. But that changed during a trip to Manhattan on December 28th, where he first visited the illustrious Nintendo world. And it just so happened that most of Nintendo's Astro Soul employees were there, including one Samus Aran, where AJ formally got her contacts, and also found out that she used the Baby Metroid DNA to create a cloned child named Max. Interestingly enough, by the start of the new decade, Zam began to stop going after AJ, almost around the same time he became acquainted to yet another space bounty hunter. Maybe because Zam knew that she couldn't compete with Samus, or maybe it was something more personal between the two. Regardless, the Empire classified Zam as killed in action, and she never went after AJ again. Okay, and then Dragon Ball happens. Don't stop, we're in luck now. Because Kai was airing on Nicktoons at the start of 2010, AJ got the contacts from Goku and his family, and he thought they were awesome. Yeah, check back in the next 4 years. Through this connection, he was able to learn key abilities and master fights with his fists, which would be helpful in the coming years. Now hold on, there's one crucial thing that needs to be established. At the end of 2009, Diana came to the decision that if AJ is reunited with his astral parents, his chances of beating Jen would be greater. But AJ kinda beat her to the punch. Earlier in December, he was looking up older rides from Disney, and was immediately traumatized from Alien Encounter. And with that exposure, Peter decided to break the ice sooner and admit that Mach-Op, the titular alien, was related to AJ. So, traumatized but determined, in February of 2010, he visited Disney to confront him. This is slightly explained in the fourth part of Fox Kids Special, but there are some added things to note. Even though Alien Encounter had been closed for 7 years, Mach-Op still had a job at Disney Quest since they featured a VR attraction based off of his alien race. But knowing the circumstances, Mach-Op also wanted to test AJ by pretending to be the evil carnivorous alien in order to fight him. AJ assumed by stabbing and shooting him he won and left the parks. But Mach-Op survived the wounds and determined to tell his son the truth about his astral mother as well. Now as for Trakina, she knew that this was her only opportunity to defeat Mickey and finish her conquest. But unsurprisingly, he totaled her. And to add extra injury, she was also fired. She returned to Aelia, Mach-Op's home planet and their house, alongside her husband. But she entered into a downward spiral. Almost everything she did for her son led into her failures. This connection made her decide that she would be the one to kill AJ before Jen got the chance. Mach-Op, growing concerns over his wife, relayed the message to Diana that AJ would need to know the full truth come the end of 2011. Honestly, the rest of 4th grade is kinda boring, and it's all build up to 5th grade, so let's get to that. Since the start of 2010, I did excessive research on retro gaming before my time. The AVGN was a perfect gateway to this subculture, even though I was too young to be watching his videos. But as mentioned before, Metroid was a helpful factor to this journey into the 8-bit and 16-bit era of gaming, and for that, I became a Metroid fan. And when I heard that a brand new 3D action-adventure Metroid game would be coming out that year, I was hyped through the roof, and you could imagine my disappointment when the game got pushed back from May to August. But yeah, Metroid Other M was my most highly anticipated game of 2010. And then I played it. Oh. But I sort of got an idea for Shareverse following my disappointment. After the game was released, the dastardly fiend Mother Brain had been revived from Hell's prison after being sentenced for several space war crimes. But this time around, she was able to get a hold of the MB Melissa Bergman android body. Even though the android initially copied Mother Brain's brain patterns, making her a clone, in Sakamoto's words, not mine, MB was able to develop a soul, and therefore channeled the soul of the original Mother Brain, where the two merged and became one being. So when she found out that Samus once again created a maternal bond with the very same Metroid that she killed, Mother Brain wanted to ruin her life again. And with Samus's #1 fanboy in the area, AJ wanted to help following his disdain from Other M. Samus fought Mother Brain once more, this time in an actual fight where Max was able to suppress Mother Brain's telepathic manipulation, and she turned into her monstrous mechanical self to keep the fight going. But Samus knew that the only way to kill Mother Brain was by using the Hyper Beam, that could theoretically destroy the planet because of Mother Brain's size. So, as an alternative, a good friend from Nintendo, Zelda decided to create a seal to trap the brain-like creature. Using AJ's copy of Other M and its subsequent Prima Guide, Mother Brain was sealed away. And that is how and why Mother Brain was locked away and freed later on in 2016. Now we get to the most crucial part of this storyline, dare I say, what it's all been leading up to. Eventually, AJ connected the dots that if Mach-Cop was his astral father, then logically, his astral mother would also be an alien from the Disney alignment that also caused him trauma, and there was only one culprit for it. And her name was not Zam. So when asking around the Disney alignment, it was pretty much confirmed that yes, his speculations were correct. In May of 2011, AJ once again returned to Disney and confronted Mach-Cop once more. Mach-Cop also agreed that his wife had gone off the deep end, and in just a few minutes later, she had arrived. After 8 years of initial trauma and 6 years after their last battle, AJ went into this fight with the mindset to kill, and vice versa. From different origin points, both fighters knew and mastered Ki, and they used it against one another. Eventually, Trakina got tired and pulled out the form that she rarely used in Fox Kids Special, her infernal Hellfire Beast form. She easily tossed AJ around, but he kept getting up in an almost equal amount of rage. But what seemed to be like his final breath, he began to rip her tentacles apart and even pushed himself to rip her out of her giant insect form. Trakina, heavily scarred and not fully regenerated, knew that she had been beat. She begged and even pressured him into killing her, and he was on the verge of doing it. But just when he was about to swing his sword, he dropped it in a state of shock. AJ could not push himself into killing the astral soul that had biologically gifted him. Mach-Cop also joined the family therapy session, and the 3 members of the alien family were finally reunited. And with this reunion, the magical BS nature of the Disney alignment gifted the 2 parents new prominent humanoid forms to aid their son. And also, that's where AJ found out where his astral parents met up and their aliases they had in the 90s. Watch Fox Kids Special for more context on that. But with all of the needed requirements at play, AJ's time in the Warner alignment Rehab was about to wrap up, as he was going to face his final test. Now finally, we could get to talk about why and how Jennifer is the way she was in the 2000s. Ever since her gamma transfusion becoming the savage She-Hulk in the 1970s, Jen had an epiphany. As a lawyer, she could not stand for second place. She had to be #1. But in order to get that title reasonably, she traveled the world several times to become the strongest astral soul in her league, which led to her finding out about the Sad AM business in the 90s. Her goal there was to use her side job hustles to create non-adjacent entertainment rights and climb the ranks in Fox Kids, even if it meant to stage an assassination on the company's president, who was a child. But when those plans failed, she cursed the business that the next president would not only be her next target, but the rest of their family to boot. And judging by Fox Kids Special, it's safe to say that Jen had been planning on killing the alien family for over a decade by this point. She had already beaten the parents in 2009, but she decided the true method of winning was to go after their child to cause severe emotional damage. and that day came at the start of the summer of 2011. But first, AJ wanted to put closure with the remnants of the Girl Wars. On June 26, he apologized to each and every member of the war, both light and dark side, and everyone agreed that this was not the same child that slaughtered everyone that came in his way just 6 years ago. Later that day, as the school had its final dismissal for the year, Jennifer, as promised, waited for AJ to leave Warner alignment custody. And because Jen not only knows all of what AJ knows, from her several travels around the world, she too mastered Ki. But since he already fought Trujillo with the mindset to kill, AJ did not think any less of this fight. Naturally, he got his ass beat, but through his stubborn determination, everything that he went through, and just being an overall sore loser, he retaliated hard, causing the Green Giant to bleed in a few places. Jennifer, at one point, once considered using the Uniblade, her personal sword that can cut through any matter, but that wouldn't be fun. So instead, the two initiated in a beam struggle. But with both sides seemingly on the same power level, actually they weren't. Jen was starting to become more cocky and annoyed for how long the fight was going. She slipped up, and AJ won the struggle, to which Jen was incinerated from the blast. After spending so long conspiring in her domination, she was stuck in Hell's prison, though she was easily able to roam around in that dimension, waiting for her sentence to be up. At last, AJ's rehab was over, entering as a broken and confused child to being a reasonable and caring preteen, or at least as caring as much of a preteen could logically be. AJ said his thanks to Diana for everything she did for him as he rode off into the sunset, spending the summer in peace and anticipating what middle school will entail. So that was the rehab arc. Sorry for everything being all over the place, but I warned you that it was. So much stuff happened within those 6 years that there was no way I was going to fit everything in it. So only the highlights and important moments made it into the final cut. Though, admittedly, some of which was just setups to other stuff that was either discussed in earlier videos, such as Mother Brain being entombed in a strategy guide, or setting up to stuff in upcoming videos, such as Felicia coming out of the void. However, I think it was necessary to also show where my reflection fits into Shareverse and how he is acquainted with a lot of astral souls. Starting in middle school, many of his contacts would come to him in the form of others, rather than him going out of his way to find them. But on that topic, if I do make my middle school video, I can assure you it'll be much more smoother to get through, since that's only 3 years. Okay, enough with the rambling because this video is way too long. If you liked the video, consider leaving a like, and subscribe for more Shareverse content and also video essays. With that, I'm AJ, and I'll see you all in the next one.